Housing discrimination. What is it? To put it simply, housing discrimination is a facet and a tool of systematic racism. Systematic racism is a set of rules, regulations, attitudes, and biases that put people of color at a systematic disadvantage to white people. Within this system, housing discrimination is a catastrophic subsystem effectively locking people of color out of the most effective wealth generator in America. The practice of housing discrimination in America began after the abolition of slavery. Following this, Jim Crow laws were in full swing in most of the country for almost a century, and in a period from around the 1930s to the present day, housing discrimination created an unequal distribution of wealth, resources, and opportunity between white people and primarily black people of color. One of the first instances of legal housing discrimination occurred between when 1924 and 1962, the government gave out over $120 billion in home loans, but only to areas which were determined to be good financial investments. Areas that were outlined as good and bad investments were based on the concentration and proximity to minorities. The safest neighborhoods you invest in were the ones with only white homeowners outlined in green, and the least desirable neighborhoods were the ones with high concentrations of minorities and outlined in red, thus the namesake redlining. This practice was first done by the U.S. government and then by banks protecting their investment and effectively barred integration almost entirely. However, if a black, Asian, or Latino family did manage to secure a house in a white neighborhood, some white people would even resort to terrorism to make them leave. White homeowners would form block associations with the intent to keep black people out of their neighborhoods. They would do this by lobbying their white neighbors not to sell and by lobbying black families who had bought a house to sell it once more and leave. However, when protests and verbal abuse weren't enough, they would resort to destroying property, beating black people and people of color in the streets, setting apartment complexes on fire, and lighting explosives outside the homes of people of color. Even today, these prejudices still exist. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, USDHUD, conducts a test where they take two testers, a white person and a person of color, and have them visit a realtor's office looking for a home. The two testers will say that they have the same credentials, income, employment, assets, etc. The only difference between them will be their race. In these tests, the USDHUD found that black testers were shown 17.7% fewer homes and apartments than white testers. However, the biggest impact that housing discrimination makes today is simply its continued existence. By locking people of color out of the home market for almost 30 years, we denied them one of the most reliable resources of wealth there is. By owning a house, especially in a developing community, the value of your house and its potential monetary yield increase steadily. To add to this, schools are funded by property tax. The less valuable your property, the lower your property tax, the worse schooling your area will be. And the students of these schools, with limited access to resources and qualified teachers, will often end up unemployed or working low-paying jobs. They will often end up in the same sorts of neighborhoods and raise their kids there, who will often face the same challenges that they themselves faced. Ta-Nehisi Coates, author and correspondent to The Atlantic, writes, Beryl Satter documents in her book Family Properties how the racist practice of redlining black people did not just rob black people of wealth, it reinforced racist beliefs already present. Because I am black, my interest rates and payments are higher than yours. Because my parents are higher, I cannot keep my property as well as you can. Because my payments are higher, I work a second job and I am not around to supervise my kids. You do not ever see the absurd contract on my house, but you do see my gutters falling off. You see my kids out past the hour of streetlights. No one told you about redlining, but many people told you I am lazy and prone to criminality. You have been told this since somewhere around the 18th century, and now you see that when I move in next door, property values dip and neighborhood becomes a ghetto, and you will be forgiven for believing that the fact of the ghetto is the fact of my lesser humanity, and with that lessened humanity, with all of the requisite stereotypes, comes an entire belief system that tolerates the killing of Trayvon Martin by a man who then tours the factory where the weapon he used to slaughter a child was made.